This is the first of several lessons designed to help you get started with creating reports from the data in our institutional data management system called Colleague. Specifically, we'll be talking about reporting from a special Colleague database called Operational Data Store, or ODS. But before we begin, I have a couple of suggestions. First, enlarge this video to display as full screen by clicking the icon in the bottom right hand corner of the video window as shown here. This will help you see some of the displays that have small print. Secondly, I suggest that if you haven't already done so, you print out a copy of the Topic 1 handout, which you will find listed as a resource on the training website under Topic 1. Use this handout as an aid to taking notes and as a place to record any questions you may want to follow up on later. If you need to, please pause this video now and get the handout. All set? Okay, let's just get started. Report writing requires certain technical skills, but more importantly, it requires an intimate knowledge of the data, its structure, and its use. I'm assuming you're familiar with the data in Colleague, at least that data specific to your function, and that you now need to know how to access it for reporting. That means you need to be able to extract the data from the database and form it into a product that fills your need. So let's begin by getting on the same page by talking about some terminology and database concepts that we'll need as we go forward. So what is Colleague? Well, Colleague is a system of programs built to facilitate certain well-defined business processes associated with institutions of higher education, such as admissions, registration, financial aid, and so forth. At its core, Colleague is a complex database, but its functionality is centered on using the data to accomplish business processes, and as users, we see Colleague as a series of screen forms. Our challenge is to learn what data is on which form and which form is to be used for which purpose. Everything revolves around forms and processes, and our mental model of the data and its organization is based on these forms that we use to work with it. But as report writers, we have to understand that the organization and the storage of data in the database really has nothing to do with the forms that are used to display it. We need to know how the data is actually stored. We need a different mental model. As Colleague has evolved, the underlying database has become fairly complex and difficult to work with by the normal Colleague user, and as a result, a separate simplified database called the ODS has been developed to facilitate report writing. ODS is Colleague's name for a separate and greatly simplified database that's intended to make reporting of Colleague data easier. A Colleague program called Data Orchestrator is used to create the ODS. Data Orchestrator transforms Colleague data into 5 separate categories of information called ODS data models. These data models are core, student, HR, finance, and advancement. On this diagram, we see the 5 data models that make up the ODS. Each data model is composed of a number of subject areas that are related to the model. For instance, the subject areas within the core data model are demographics, academic credentials, graduation, communication management, and contacts. As you can see, the student data model has subject areas that are named applicants, applications, courses, faculty, enrollment, and so forth. And all of these subject areas are related in some way to students. And some subjects are related to other subjects. For example, applicants and applications are related because applicants file applications. Also, a subject in one data model may be related to a subject in another data model, for instance, demographics and applicants. Every applicant will have a demographic record with information that describes that particular applicant. In the ODS database, we can think of subjects as tables or files, each with data fields that are pertinent to that subject. Now, this will be our new mental model of the organization of data within ODS. It's also the model on which the ODS documentation is organized. Our biggest report writing challenge will be to figure out where a particular data element resides in the ODS, and this mental model should help us with that. Now, here are some key characteristics of ODS which are important for you to be aware of. First, ODS is not a clone of Colleague. Data fields are extracted from Colleague but are simplified. The way they're simplified is that data fields are reorganized into subject areas. Multi-valued fields are transformed into single-valued ones, because multi-valued fields give us great difficulty in writing reports. So the ODS breaks those multi-valued fields down into a series of single-valued ones. Also, computed columns are transformed into their actual values. As you know, computed columns contain equations or recipes for how to calculate the value that particular field represents, like GPA. And it stores this recipe or this equation, not the actual value itself. But in ODS, the computed column is evaluated and that actual GPA value is stored in the ODS data field called GPA. So it makes reporting much easier. Non-essential fields are not included in the ODS. There are a large number of fields within Colleague that are not really useful for reporting, and so those fields are just left out of the ODS altogether. Colleague data fields that are not currently in the ODS, however, if we need them, can be added to ODS tables. And also data that's not in Colleague at all, but might be available elsewhere, for instance in an Access database. That data can be added to an ODS table if necessary. ODS allows users to access data using standard Microsoft Office tools, as well as many other SQL-based reporting tools and programming languages. So in many cases we don't have to learn new products in order to produce reports. We can use the Office programs that we are familiar with, like Excel or Access. So why do we need ODS? Why not just report directly from Colleague? Well, as I said before, Colleague is built to facilitate well-defined business processes. By its nature, ad hoc reporting is not well defined. The specifics of what's required in a report change with every report. In a few instances where reports can be defined in advance, Colleague does have pre-built reports that can be run from within Colleague, but for the most part, reports must be created as the need arises. The Colleague database design is complex and doesn't conform to standard relational database design principles. And the upshot of that is that industry standard reporting tools won't work directly with colleague. And report programming from within colleague requires expert programming skills. But ODS reduces complexity because it's a standard relational database containing only essential data, organized by subject area, and accessible by standard tools. Lastly, the ODS provides our colleague data with an extra degree of security because ODS is a completely separate database from colleague. If we goof something up in ODS, all we have to do is refresh it from colleague, and no harm is done. So hopefully you now have an idea as to what the ODS is, where it fits in colleague reporting. So in the next lesson we'll look at some general database terminology and concepts that you'll need to know as we go forward.